Welcome to The Trader, a Spotify Top 10 Traitors podcast. My name's Matthew. I'm a writer working in unscripted TV development, and I am a 100% faithful fan of the multi-award winning hit TV competition series, The Traitors. This podcast features deep dives into every episode of the show, as well as interviews with contestants. This season of the podcast is dedicated to season 2 of The Traitors US. And my co-host for almost every episode is David Bloomberg. David, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it's great to be back. I am, as Matthew just said, David Bloomberg, and I am a 100% traitorous fan of the show. Um, as most listeners know, I've been covering reality TV for over 23 years, online, in newspapers, on my own reality TV websites, on podcasts, on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, and of course on Twitter and similar platforms. So if there's a possible way to cover reality TV, I believe I've found it.
Yeah. And last week we were joined by a Canadian, or 2 weeks ago, I should say, joined by a Canadian traitor, Melissa B. And since it was so much fun, this week we're joined by a Canadian faithful. It's Mary Wisdon. Mary, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, love it. I'm so excited to be here.
Excellent.
100% faithful, but definitely look like a traitor. So
Yes, I was going to say, he claims you're a faithful, but I have it on good authority that
Mhm.
you seem to be a traitor.
I'm not ride or die enough. That's the thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you may be a traitor by the end of this podcast once
Yeah.
you get into it. We'll see. And of course, Mary, it must be quite different for you to watch the show as a former participant compared
Mhm.
to, the way that I see it. What's it like to see it from your perspective?
It feels like I'm having a visceral reaction every time I watch it. If I miss an episode and then I catch up watching 2 episodes, I need to like take a bath and relax myself because it feels like it's all coming back at me, and I'm just like I feel like a little bit of a war veteran.
I bet. And I mean, we're talking about the Traitors US today. Apart from the cast, what do you feel are the sort of big differences between this version of the show and your version?
Oh, I'm absolutely loving the missions. Like they're all kind of similar to the ones that we've seen already, but they've changed them up enough so it feels like a different show.
Yeah.
They like you watch the American, the British, and the Canadian one, and you're like, I've seen this mission like 3 times now. And so I think like the biggest is the missions for me.
Okay. And
That's okay. All these missions will be on the season 2 of the Traders Canada. So
Yeah, absolutely.
and season 2 of New Zealand, and so they all travel.
well, I mean, is that David? I don't know if you're like hinting something here. Mary, you might have some sort of inside info. Is Canada season 2 official? Is that happening? Do we know?
I have no idea, and I don't think
Oh
anyone
no.
would tell me.
Yeah, I mean,
I thought you had a scoop for us there.
I wish.
I just presume it's happening. I mean, I can't imagine why it wouldn't.
It was a very popular show. It was in their
Yeah.
like top 5 for the season, so I
Yeah,
have to imagine. Yeah.
I think so too. I'm sure. I'm sure it must come back. Now, I think we are ready to set up our own game of betrayal and deception. We are going to play the Trader Traitor. Our not so secret mission from here on in is to tell one lie to one another. The lie has to be a fabrication or a made up fact, big or small, about the traitors, ourselves, or anything else at all. For example, I could lie and say that I actually know the outcome of this episode's cliffhanger, when in reality, I absolutely don't know. However, I couldn't lie and say that I think Phaedra is the best traitor of all time. That would be a fake opinion. So we are looking for fake facts, not fake thoughts and feelings. And again, because there are 3 of us, we are going to work within a triangle of detection. So, David, I'm giving myself a difficult job again because I'm going to guess your lie. David, you're going to guess Mary's lie, and Mary at the end of the episode will guess my lie. If the
Mhm.
original guesser is wrong, the other host could jump in and try and steal the win. So, are we ready to lie and betray one another?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Me too. In that case, our game begins now. And before we launch into our discussion of episode 9, David, you were missing from the podcast last week. So
I
there was a
was.
lot to talk about. You must have thoughts on what you missed on.
Yeah, I did want to share some thoughts since I was visiting my son in Houston rather than being here. And I think I had told you something big is going to happen the week that I'm not here. Either Sandra will get banished or murdered, or that'll be when Dr. Will's appearance was. And yeah, it was Dr. Will. And so I was initially very annoyed when I saw that I'd miss out on his appearance. But then when I saw what they did with him, I became more annoyed that he was completely wasted by production.
Yeah.
Mhm.
He is arguably the best Big Brother player ever. He has a whole persona built up around him. He won season 2. He was back for All Stars in season 7. He got 4th place in that season. And many people think he could have won, but basically let his buddy and partner in crime, Mike Boogie, win instead. I actually, side note, I actually met Mike Boogie in his bar one time when I was visiting California for a Survivor finale. But then later, Mike Boogie went a little off the rails and was found guilty of stalking Dr. Will a few years ago.
Oh my God.
Yes, yes. Dr. Will also won on a special Big Brother edition of The Price is Right, and even made an appearance in the Book of Boba Fett. So he's got a lot going for him. And they brought him in here to be like, hey, here's the cabin. I'm locking you in. And then yeah, it was just a big, stupid waste.
It would have been a better job for like the groundskeeper guy Fergus to do that.
Yeah.
Well, he's
It
not
would have
allowed
made
to
more
speak.
sense.
You
I know, but
they-
it would have made more sense to have him be the
Right.
one shaking the bugs and stuff
right,
than to have this guy who everyone's expecting much more from.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, in the British version, Claudia just did it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no reason Alan couldn't have done this. None whatsoever. They wanted to bring in Dr. Will, and they were like, okay, what are we going to have him do? I don't know. Now, I don't know if you guys saw this, but after the episode, he did at least one interview. I'm not sure if it was more than one, where he kind of trashed the Big Brother players who had played the Traitors and said they were never even good at Big Brother. And so, yeah, some of them fired back and said he was too scared to come on because he knew he'd be voted out first.
Mhm.
I don't think he was scared per se, but yeah, he probably knows he'd have been target number 1 for his combination of his huge personality and his reputation. But meanwhile, in his real life, he's a dermatologist. He's the chief medical officer for his clinics. I think they're called Laser Away. And this way he gets a nice little fee, a free trip to Scotland, a little publicity, and he only has to work for a few hours. So, yeah, of course he's not going to play in that case.
Not when the alternative is getting dumped with bugs.
Yeah, and well, he wouldn't have made it this far. There's absolutely no chance he would have made it this far.
And you have some thoughts on a couple of other things actually that happened last week.
Yeah, so I know you talked about the Trishelle and Peter plan on the podcast.
Yeah.
Ooh, say that 5 times fast. But I just want to specifically note my biggest issue with it, which is that Trishelle did the same thing Dan did. She, rather than telling people the evidence ahead of time, she was like, oh, wait for the round table and I'll tell you all my notes. Now, she at least mentioned who she was going after, which is the same person Dan was going after. But, we discussed it at the time. People can change their minds at the round table. It's not and Mary, you could certainly speak to this, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Tell me, hopefully, that I'm right. But it's not the time to dump a bunch of new information because you can't digest it that quickly
No.
and react to it. And they saw Dan fail doing this, and then they did the same thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I guess Trichelle's thinking was that Phaedra's too smart and she is so good at arguing back. She didn't really want to face that. But I guess for Mary, what's your experience of this?
Yeah, I can see why like you don't want to give Phaedra time to like come up with an argument because she is so smart and quick. But uh yeah, no, you don't want to. Most of the day is spent giving everyone your information because if you're coming to the round table with like a gotcha moment, most people are really suspicious of that. And they're like, well, why didn't you tell us before? Why is this just coming up now? Because like the whole point of Traitors is sharing the information that you have. Well, the whole point of Traitors is to hide and get to the end. But if you're playing stupidly, then the point is to share all your information. And if you're not going to, don't bring it to the round table as like a gotcha because it's just so. It does feel stupid.
Yeah, and the thing is, like you both said, Phaedra is so good at responding. She's good at responding in the heat of the moment. So
Yeah.
you know you're facing that already. So get everyone else on your side. Don't obviously try not to let the information leak to Phaedra. Don't tell Sheree. I mean, then it'll get to her. But I think, I don't know that it would have gotten to her from some of the other people, but at least give them a chance. Spread the information. It was just terrible.
Yeah. And
So
your favorite player of all, Kate?
yes. I know people wanted to hear my thoughts on Phaedra's choice of who to blackmail because of some of my well-known opinions about Kate. And it may surprise people, but I'm actually not all that upset about it because I think it, and as we saw a bit in this episode, it will test whether Kate can actually play the game.
Yeah.
The reason I didn't like her was she came in initially just to cause drama. And once she realized she wasn't going to win, she caused more drama and was just messing with the game. If she could actually play, well then good. Let's see her play. And we'll see what happens as we get into this episode.
Yeah. I'm curious to find out what you both think of Kate in this episode. And what your predictions are for Kate moving ahead. Many you're laughing already. I can tell you have some thoughts.
Yeah. I have quite a few thoughts on Kate this episode.
I can't wait. In that case, I think we should go ahead and begin deep diving into episode 9. So I kind of don't really need to do a recap because as David, you've covered it.
I just did. Yeah.
I was just going to say, basically, my first point was Dr. Will made a pointless appearance at the creepy cabin.
Yes.
And at the cabin, Trishelle wins a shield. Didn't tell everyone except the buddies that she was with at the time. And the round table came down to a battle between the two traitors, Parvati and Phaedra, with some added confusion surrounding Peter's apparent sudden change of heart towards Parvati. In the end, Parvati was banished, meaning Phaedra was made to offer an ultimatum to a faithful, either to become a traitor or be murdered. And she seemingly fairly quickly chose Kate. Mm-hmm. And we finished the last episode with Kate arriving at the dungeon that she was not very happy about. And so episode 9 starts right there. We're in the dungeon. We'd seen a little preview of this, or I'd seen a preview of this on social media. A sort of clip of this, like 30 seconds or so. I saw it on Kate's X page. I think it was before it had been broadcast. The time difference confuses me, but I'd seen this little clip. Basically, Kate and the cloaked traitor arrived kind of face to face, but not really face to cloak, face to hood, before Phaedra reveals herself. It's it's the campest thing I've ever seen. It's so dramatic. It's so ridiculous. Kate calls Phaedra a sly fox, and Phaedra says, "Hello, Kate," in a very sort of like soap opera way. Phaedra tells her, "You're smart, you're clever. I think you'll make a crazy cool killer with me."
Yeah,
It's so rehearsed.
it was, yes, rehearsed, ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, people were already saying to me in various comments, like, "Oh, I think the whole Traitors turret is scripted." And I'm like, no, it's not scripted. It's just that they're overacting,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and over dramatizing every word that they say. And this took it to new levels.
Yeah.
Well, and like behind the scenes stuff is like hurry up and wait. So there's probably lots of times where they're like kind of know what's happening, but don't know what's happening. And they're just standing around waiting. And they're like, okay, so if this is what's happening, I'm going to say this. If this is what's happening, you've got time to think about it. It's not like this instantaneous thing. It's definitely like, okay, they're coming to grab you. And now you've got 20 minutes to not talk to anyone and just stand there alone,
Yeah.
So that's why it feels rehearsed and stuff, is because people have time to think about what they want to say.
Yeah.
I wonder if, Mary, you can help us out here. Does that apply as well to roundtables? But is there any gap between all the votes coming in and the person who's banished, like going up to stand and reveal the truth? Or is that
No. For that one, that's like we have like what gets cut out is pretty much all the discussions, because like roundtables are quite a long time, and then they cut it down to like 20 minutes of an hour-long episode, right? So yeah, what happens is everyone says their thing, and then the vote happens really quickly, and then they get up and say their thing and leave. There's no real space between that happening.
Yeah. Which I guess adds to the intensity that translates on screen, that there's no in between. Okay. So Kate basically is given her offer by Phaedra, waits again with a dramatic pause, and then,
Yes.
of course, she accepts. Hooray!
Shocking.
Yeah.
I mean, just, oh my gosh, and that, she said she's not really giving me a choice here.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
it's true. Although one person pointed out, in her first season, Kate was trying to get eliminated. So, she could have done that this time. It's like, well, if she wanted to get eliminated, she just went to come back.
Yeah.
But, last season she was trying to get eliminated because she knew she had lost at that point.
Yeah.
And now she sees something that could be fun and actually lead to winning. So
Sure. And a couple of people left comments on YouTube saying to me on the last episode, of course she's going to accept. Why are you even thinking she won't accept? After Peter's weird decision making, I didn't know what to.
Yeah.
I thought anyone could do anything in this show, so I wasn't placing any bets. But she accepts, of course. I wondered if they would keep this as a sort of cliffhanger until breakfast. Like I thought they might stop. Not even though again it's kind of obvious that Kate would probably accept, but I thought maybe they would not show us what she said, cut to breakfast, wait until the moment Kate walks in and we realize she must have but no, they just show us straight away. And in Kate's interview, she says that she loves a dramatic cloak and a VIP club and knowing secrets.
Yes.
She's also surprised and disappointed that Phaedra is the only traitor left. And they go on to talk about that a little more in the next scene because they move to Traitor's Tower. I'm going to pause here and make sort of explain something else I talked about last week on the podcast. So I assumed, as did my co-host Stephen, that if Kate accepted the recruitment, there would just be no murder. But again, a lot of people on YouTube had left comments saying, no, there'll be another murder as well, because in the other versions of the show, that's what happened. There's a blackmail recruitment, but then they also murder someone else. However, Stephen was rewatching Traitors Canada, and
they didn't do that.
Yeah, and I guess spoiler alert for anyone listening. We won't mention names, so we'll not. So that's not a spoiler. I think we won't talk about names of contestants, but yeah, in Traitors in your season, this sort of thing
they didn't do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel I was justified in assuming there
Yeah.
wouldn't be a murder here.
I think that probably it depends on numbers. I mean, there was
Mm.
an interview done with the producers, and the interviewer asked the producers, like, why did you do this stupid twist? So, it was a couple episodes ago. And they were like, yeah, okay, we've heard it. We know. But, the question was also brought up, aren't you running behind now on the numbers game,
Yeah.
because of the way it worked? And they said, well, we take that into consideration. We know that things can happen. And where we have flexibility is near the end, we can either have a murder before the final banishment or not. But I wonder if this was also a time when they could have a murder or not, depending on the numbers.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that if, like, something different had happened with the Peter situation, that if they had just murdered that night, then they wouldn't have had one this time.
Yeah.
But with it being a murder, it really, I think, causes problems for the faithful
Yeah, definitely.
because
They don't
they
assume
may
there's been a
not have
recruit.
realized that there was only one traitor left. Like you said, Kate just said,
Hmm.
"Oh, I'm surprised there's only one."
Yeah.
So if they thought there was more than one left, they won't think that there's been another recruit slash blackmail slash ultimatum, and so they're not looking for changes in behavior, although we'll discuss someone who finds one in a minute. But, uh, so it does put them in a bad position for them not to realize that, because Kate couldn't have been an original traitor.
Yeah,
Uh,
she wasn't there.
right.
Mm-mm.
And so unless she came in as a
As one,
traitor, which
yeah.
they said she could do, but I don't think anyone thought that she had, then it really does screw with the planning a little bit.
Yeah. And Kate goes on to sort of ask Phaedra, who were the traitors at the start? So you've been one from the beginning,
Mhm.
you weren't recruited, she figures it all out. And Phaedra delivers one of her many classic lines and says that the being with the previous two traitors was like eating dry Melba toast with no butter, no jam, which I rewatched more than once because it made me laugh so
Yeah.
much. They go on to discuss who they might murder then, because they are going to murder. They talk about Kevin. Their main reason is that he's annoying.
Yes.
Which I
Yeah.
think, don't know if that's the best reason to murder
I
someone.
mean, that's Kate. That's Kate in a nutshell right there. It's like, oh, I have the power to get rid of people who annoy me. Cool.
Yeah, if I was a traitor, that's exactly how I would do
Yeah.
it too. I'd be like, all right, who do I have beef with right now?
Yeah.
And Phaedra's also annoyed about Kevin's eye twitch comment that he
Mhm.
picked up on. And she says that he's a follower to Peter the dictator. And then Kate brings another classic line and says he puts the dick in dictator. And they talk about his crazy behavior tonight, meaning the way that he seems to have very suddenly
Mhm.
changed his mind about
Right.
Parvati. One minute he's gunning for her, the next he's trying to form a sort of alliance with her. But Phaedra is worried that he may have a shield because he's always so competitive in the missions. So maybe
Right.
he did find one. They talk about Trishelle, and they're very annoyed that she has her bullet points on Phaedra, and they think she probably now has a vendetta. Of course, they don't realize that actually Trishelle is the one with the shield.
Yeah. And I mean,
Mhm.
I was initially annoyed that they just assumed Peter had the shield, so they weren't going to go after him. But one thing that was never mentioned, either in the show or in the post-mortem show, was that whether he has the shield or not, he was obviously going to be a target at banishment. Now, we don't know the
Mhm.
outcome. I'll talk about my thoughts on that later, but why would we've seen it before. Why would you murder someone who is going to be an obvious target at banishment? And yet they never brought that up. They're just like, oh, he probably has a shield. Like, no, that's not the reason you shouldn't go for it.
Yeah, I thought about the same thing a little bit later on in the episode. I can't remember what it is, and we'll get there. But yeah, this thought sort of occurred to me that the it's to do with John. I think a little bit later on in the mission, but yes, we'll reach that
Mhm.
point. So they make their decision about who they want to murder. We don't get to see it. Kate says it's the best thing she's done in the castle. So she's loving this new role. And she says, signed, sealed, delivered, you're dead. This is fun. So yeah, David, she's enjoying it. She's playing the game now.
Well, she's playing a game. I'm not sure it's the game, I mean, I mean, the thing is, the Kevin banishment, even though she did it for the wrong reasons, which, gosh, I sound like I'm watching The Bachelor or something. They're there for the wrong reasons. But you know, you've got to get rid of Peter's pals, and Kevin is one of Peter's pals. And Kevin also, came after Phaedra with the whole eye twitching thing. I just wanted Phaedra to say when she did it, whose eye is twitching now, Kevin? Um, but so yeah, getting rid of him, getting rid of John, getting rid of Trishelle, it's all the same.
Yeah, yeah. And so we move on to breakfast. Mary, I have to ask because it seems like it's a hot topic amongst ex-contestants. How was the breakfast on your season?
A lot of pastries and cold meat.
Okay. The
I would
UK
I would
contestants like to
survive.
complain.
Oh yeah, yeah. I would survive on a croissant with like shoved with a bunch of like cold cut meat in it, and that would be like my main meal for the day.
Okay. So at breakfast here, Kate and Sandra are first to arrive. Kate says that she's going to continue to focus on Peter, and Sandra seems quite keen on this plan too. CT arrives next. He sort of joins in this discussion about Peter's fickleness. And by the way, this is the point where I became very aware of CT's accent. He's so New York. He's like, Peter's rubbing me the wrong way. He's all over the place. I looked it up. He was born in Queens. I was like, yes, I have identified his accent.
Yeah.
I guess because I don't know CT outside of this.
Right. He's not even that.
I love him though.
I mean, his accent isn't even all that New York. I mean, it's New York, but it's not. Yeah. Yeah.
He says something else later in the episode as well that's just it really makes me laugh just listening to him. And Peter arrives next, which this is the point where I made this note that you mentioned, David. It made sense to me. I thought, yeah, of course they've not murdered him because he's probably going to get himself banished. Why would they? So he arrives fairly early on. MJ arrives with Peter as well and immediately clocks Kate as looking different. She says something about, Kate, you've got a strange expression on your face or something like that. Kate's now furious, suddenly very self-aware. She's worrying about what food she's eating. Would a traitor eat salmon? She's asking herself. It's funny. It's I didn't think she would be that. I thought she would sort of fit into the role quite easily, but it's funny to see her kind of panicking a bit and really
a little flustered.
She's so stressed out, like she's literally sweating in a lot of those scenes, and you're like, girl, chill. Like
and
who knew MJ had such good Traitors?
Exactly. I was surprised that she picked up on it, although it seems to not really amount to anything. I mean, from what we see, ever references it for the rest of the episode, but
not yet. But it took several episodes of seeing, Phaedra's fascination with breakfast before that came up too. So
yes, and comes up again here as well. And Mary, I didn't even ask. I assume had you been offered recruitment, would you have taken it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
So more players arrive at breakfast, and we end up waiting for either Trishelle or Kevin. And this is a point where I noticed we've kind of returned to this pattern of like the last two people arriving being a faithful. I'd kind of forgotten about that for a while, and I thought, wonder if anyone's thinking about this. the players have different opinions about who's going to be murdered. They talk a little bit about the shield. Of course, some of them know that Trishelle had the shield, but aren't saying anything just yet. There's a dramatic door opening, an exciting pause, and it is Trishelle who arrives. I thought when as I was watching it, I thought that they would have gone for Trishelle and failed, and that both Trishelle and Kevin were going to walk in.
Me too. That's what I thought as well.
I thought they might have done it to have Trishelle come in, and then I was waiting because there was like a pause,
Yeah.
like, oh, it must have been Kevin. And then I expected Kevin to walk in, but when Trishelle didn't speak up and say, oh, I had a death warrant, whatever, and just, then I was like, oh, no, it's just, it's just Kevin.
Yeah, I thought so too. We flash back to Traitors Tower, and Phaedra and Kate basically say they want to break down Peter's gang, Peter's pals. We see Kevin receiving his letter. He seems okay about it. He just kind of wants to keep the letter.
Yeah.
So
when he said that, I was like, you do get to keep the letter. Like yelling at my phone.
Do you still
excited?
Do you have like mementos from your time on the show?
Yeah, they like sent us a little hat, which is cute, and I got a letter being like, "Hey, thanks for being on the show. You did great." And I got a Polaroid that they took, and then my letter that says you've been murdered.
One day I want one. I don't want to be murdered on the show, but I want a letter.
Yeah.
So back at breakfast, Trishelle reveals that she had the shield and that only a few people knew about this. Wait, and she makes this very brief comment. She says, only a few people knew I had that. Interesting. And I wondered if for a moment her suspicion was going to swing towards her close friends. It doesn't really play out that way, but maybe it will later.
It's interesting, though, that they didn't use this as evidence when they used other things as evidence.
Yeah.
And we had talked about it before when Bergie was targeted, even when Peter was saying, oh, this is the plan, and if it happens this way, this proves it. And you were like, no, it doesn't prove anything. And this is an exact situation like that. Like, this doesn't prove anything because, a few people knew. They didn't target her. Does that mean that
it was one of them?
It was one of them? No, it just means the traitor. I mean, there's, it was, even if it was the traitors were all outside of Peter's pals, there's still a 1 in 4 chance only of hitting the person with the shield.
Yeah, I thought so. I mean, essentially, my note here is just that Kate and Phaedra got lucky. Really?
Yeah. They got lucky that Kevin was more annoying.
Yeah. So, I mean, I imagine as soon as they hear Trishelle saying, oh, I had the shield, they were probably, wiping their foreheads like, phew. Yes. So, and Phaedra is still loving breakfast at this point. She's engrossed in that. And Kate is struggling with the adjustment to life as a traitor now. Alan arrives, does his usual, takes down has Peter get the Kevin portrait down for him, throws it on the floor, says the show must go on, and he invites them to meet him at the church later and says, don't be late, or in his most Scottish accent, or I'll be cross. I wonder what this mission is going to be. So John is invited to give a speech, like in honor of Kevin, and he just says, bless him. Well, John's had enough of speeches.
Yeah, well, from what I've heard, the chatter I've heard is that whatever we see of John's speeches at the round table, they're much, much longer and much
Oh, I bet they are. Yeah, I bet they are. As a politician, can I just say, having John on this crew when there is a Traitors UK is such weird casting, but I love it. Like, he could easily have been on the Traitors UK, but they're like, no, let's save him for the Bravo housewives and the Big Brother people. Like, what's the thinking in that?
Well, I mean, the UK one doesn't have celebrities, so
that's fair.
But it is still bizarre that of all the people they could have chosen, they have chosen an ex-MP. It's
Yeah.
I still haven't wrapped my head around why
I
he's
mean,
done this.
also, I feel like from the things that you have said, Matthew, that he would not necessarily be received with unanimous approval if he were on a British show.
Mhm.
Uh,
No. Yeah.
whereas, here in the colonies,
Yeah, they
we don't know him at all. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's very strange to see him on there. I
yeah.
can't explain it. At the end of breakfast, really, the last thing is that Peter just seems to be very worried that his group is diminishing now.
Yes. And now let me say, he's like, oh, my close friends are gone. We keep taking blow after blow. Yeah, that's what happens when you form an obvious minority alliance.
Mhm.
And I mean, what did you think was going to happen? Well,
Especially with all
obviously
the
he
door
thought,
closing and stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
And he even tries justifying that later, but it's like, no, you made an obvious alliance of a
Mhm.
minority. It's we make this joke on Survivor a lot where someone will be like, okay, we have an alliance of four, we're good, and you realize that there's like 12 people or something, and it's like, no, four is
Yeah.
not a majority of 12. And it's similar here. It's, I mean, maybe at first not everybody was banding together, but when you see one group solidly get together and, like you said, Mary, close the door on other people, literally
Mhm.
close the door, yes, the other people are naturally going to come together. And some of them already were the housewives, the Bravo people.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it just shows he does not understand strategic games nearly as much as he thinks he does. And Kate said something about this in the tower earlier too, about he thinks he's so smart, and he does, and he's not.
Yeah.
No. The
Uh,
Bachelor is a different kind of mind fuck than the Traitors is. Like,
Yes.
what?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which he even references later on. Yeah.
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 So we see some discussions around the house after breakfast. Kate, in fact, if it's right here, Kate asks Peter if this is more enjoyable than The Bachelor, and he
Mhm.
says yes. He's like, The Bachelor is more stressful than this, which is an interesting take, but
Yeah,
again,
and there was,
he's
from what I've heard, there was a lot more sex on The Bachelor than there has been
yeah,
here. So,
as far as we know, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. There's secrets you don't need to know about.
that's right. Yeah.
Mary, is that another exclusive from your season?
We just found out why that one guy was booted.
I'm going to use that as the promo clip.
Oh,
So,
great.
Get me in so much trouble.
in the kitchen, we see Phaedra, CT, and Trishelle talking. CT thinks that Peter is, very suspicious. He's creating too much confusion. And Phaedra points out that she says every traitor banished, there's only been two, but every traitor banished has had some sort of connection with Peter or some sort of dealing with Peter. And Trishelle, she's not into this. She's not going along with it. And we see her in her interview saying, no, I am fairly sure Peter is faithful. I have to say at this point, actually, when the season started, I immediately thought Trishelle was kind of an idiot. I think because
Hmm.
she clung on to like a peppermint in the very first episode and got her banished for a really dumb
Right.
reason. And although
Mhm.
she's maybe making some bad like tactical decisions along the way, actually I think Trishelle is very she's a sort of good she's quite observant. Like she actually does notice things about people and is generally on the right track. So I underestimated her, I think. Trishelle and John are then talking, and John says, they're in the sort of one of the corridors at this point. John says 5 votes because he's a politician. He's adding up numbers and things. 5 votes are enough to get someone out. And he says, you, me, and Peter really need to pick someone to vote to tonight and stick together. But 3 of us isn't enough. And Trishelle says, well, there are four. She uses this phrase. She says there are 4 others from the same network all voting together. And I didn't know if she meant network as in Bravo or network
I
as
think
in
she
just
did.
okay.
I think she
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
Yeah, I got that as well.
I wondered if it was like a metaphorical sort of
Yeah.
network.
It's kind of both, actually.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And John asks, "So, do you think we're doomed?" And she says, "Yes."
Yeah.
And I think she's right.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Bravo girls are discussing Peter and how chaotic he is. We come back out to the corridor. Peter joins John and Trishelle, and they tell him, "Look, we're worried. The Bravo girls, they are not going to turn on Phaedra and vote her out. What are we going to do?" And then there's this funny moment when Trishelle suggests, she's like, "Well, look, one of us is probably going to be banished," and and Peter goes, "Oh, what? Oh, banishment? Like this hadn't even occurred to him. Like he's
The
totally
fact that he was shocked, I was like, bro, are you not playing the same game that everyone else is?
yeah,
Well,
Like,
because he knows
he's
he's
the most
faithful.
faithful of the
Yes.
faithful, and like he's doing all of this evidence and stuff. And I'm like, you're an idiot a little bit. Like, if you're doing all this shit and the only thing you're worried about is murder, like, I don't know. I think everyone should be afraid of banishment every
yeah.
round table.
Yeah.
It just feels like he's 2 steps behind everyone
Mm-hmm.
else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, although later on, this is a moment I will come back to. But yeah, he's like, oh, what? Wait, what minute? I might be banished. So they realize that they need to sway 2 people, at least 2 people, against Phaedra, and they think that CT and Sandra are the best bets for this. Peter goes off to talk to CT, and CT is just very honest and says, "Well,
Yeah.
I'm probably going to vote for you."
Yeah.
He just tells him. He says that he says, you're acting crazy, you're doing chaotic things, you're switching allegiances with Parvati. And Peter says, "My erratic behavior, it's all part of my strategy. I've got a plan. This is the game plan." CT's just not buying it, leaving
Yeah.
Peter very frustrated. It's time then for the mission. We head towards a church. There are lots of jokes about this.
Okay, before we get to that, I have a couple more things about Peter, if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
go for it.
Because he says at one point, and I can't remember who he said it to or just out loud, he says, "We're just dealing with distraction after distraction." And I'm like yelling slash
It's
tweeting,
you.
yeah, because you're causing them, you know? And then he was talking about, he's like, I want these faithfuls to win. Peter, this is an individual game. It doesn't mean shit if faithfuls win if you're not one of them.
Yeah.
And someone on Twitter pointed out, well, he'll take credit if the faithfuls win. I'm like, sure, he'll take credit. That's not the kind of credit that you can use to buy things with,
No.
So all the credit in the world doesn't mean anything. Plus it'll be wrong on top of that. But yeah, he's still thinking in this, I'm a faithful and the faithfuls have to win thing, when the best way for him to have proceeded in the game, earlier he was worried about, oh, we're getting knocked off and everything. Laura, who was my co-host the week you weren't here, said on Twitter, it's almost like he should have accepted the invitation from the Traitors to join them. So, hey, that could have helped control the situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he's got to be one of the faithfuls.
Yeah. I think he mentions it at some other point in the episode as well, this sort of like emotional tie to being a faithful, as if it sort of makes him this good person. It's really silly.
Which I did want to say, I forgot in the post-mortem last week.
Yeah.
And I posted a TikTok about this, so you may have seen it already. But Parvati specifically talked about how, she wanted to point out she was playing a game. She was a traitor in the game. That doesn't make her a bad person. It doesn't make her evil. She was playing the game. And it just seems like, we already know there were people from season 1 who needed to hear this and probably still didn't listen. But I think some of the people in this season needed to hear it too. And
you have to remind yourself that it's not personal quite a lot.
Right.
Yeah, and then like watching it back and seeing conversations that were had about
Hmm.
you, you're kind of like, okay, it's a game. Just remember that it's a game, and it's remember a game that you signed up for.
Right.
And so like there's no hard feelings for anyone, obviously, but while you're in it, yeah, you have to constantly remind yourself. And I think viewers forget that it's a game as well. And they
Oh yeah,
forget that a
some
lot of people
definitely.
put on a character for their reality TV
Hmm.
persona. Like it's still you, but it's you times two, right? And yeah, I think a lot of people forget that, especially viewers, because they're like, this person is terrible because I saw them do this terrible thing in a heavily edited episode of a TV show, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, I think a lot of, well, at least a lot of the people who I deal with on social media understand that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I also get like in the TikTok and YouTube area where it tends to go to people who are not necessarily in my usual circle. That's where I'll get more of those sorts of comments about,
Yeah.
the comments that sound like Quentin from season one. Um,
Mm-hmm.
or even Andy from season one, which by the way, let me just mention. So there's this whole Traitors US cruise going on. Have you
Oh
guys heard about
yeah.
this?
Yeah, I've heard about it.
Okay. And mostly it's the big stars, but also Andy is on there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've said my piece about Andy a couple of times, but Andy is going on a cruise to play a game. Wait, I thought it wasn't a game. I thought you weren't allowed. Who is because the people who sign up don't just book the cruise. You book whose team you want to be on.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And I
right.
don't mean
Mm-hmm.
to be mean, but who wants to be on Andy's team after they went after Suri and took it so personally and everything else? I again, I don't mean to be mean. I don't know Andy personally. I only know what we saw, but what we saw in the reunion was not positive. Here we are. Mary's like, oh, these fans, they have negative opinions and it's just a game. And I immediately launched into an attack on someone. But
No, no, no,
uh,
no. I get it.
yeah, but it's just like that was the one where I just looked at and shook my head. And I'm like, I mean, I'm sure they're getting paid to go on and that's good. But I don't know if the celebrities, the people who have been on the show, can win as well, or if it's only someone else who signs up for the cruise who can win.
Mm-hmm.
But one way or another, I'm sure they're getting some sort of appearance fee.
Yeah. Yeah.
But which is good if they can get money off of it, great. But are they going to get mad if someone else wins? Again. So yeah, sorry, that was just swirling through my brain for a few weeks now, and boom, it just all came out.
Needed to come out. It was bubbling there.
Yes, yes.
Well, speaking of kindness and compassion and forgiveness, we arrive at the church for the
Ah,
mission.
where Kate seems to be afraid to enter. Yes.
Yeah. And they make jokes about Phaedra, like, oh, she'll love it here, because she's quite often talking about the sweet baby Jesus.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we enter the church, and my first impression was, oh, this is a new mission. Because
Me too.
they had these
Mm-hmm.
masked, cloaked figures. I thought, oh, they're going to do something different. What's it going to be? But no, just
Yeah.
like Dr. Will, they leave pointlessly. So
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, they were just there for a bit of ceremony. Off they go, and they reveal actually the mission that we probably expected if we've seen maybe the UK version,
Yes.
or even Australia had
I, I
missions like this.
I did like Alan telling them to lighten up. I thought that was pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
So the mission basically is that they have to shoot glass panels with a crossbow in quotation marks to stop other players running a
Ballista.
shield.
Mini
It's a
ballista.
ballista. Yes, I
Yeah, yeah.
remembered this.
And they were all terrible at it.
Oh God, they were so bad.
They lost so much money
Yeah,
on that.
takes a
I
while.
couldn't believe it. I was watching it. I was like, are the producers not going to like step in at any point and be like, okay, you guys, let's give you a training session on this? Like,
Yeah.
how are they all so terrible at it?
Yeah, I did wonder, what do they do if they just all keep missing until the entire
Mhm.
25,000 is gone?
Then they start pulling it from the pot that they already have. I think. I'm sorry, in this mission you lost $2,000.
Yeah.
So yeah, they begin with 25,000. I've put pounds here, of course it's dollars. And every time they miss, it deducts $250 from that. I'll go through some of who targets who, but I get it's so long, like you said, Mary. I can't go through
I
every single
I don't
person.
even know that you. I mean, the thing is, they just miss, and then
Yeah,
they finally get on a strategy that doesn't really rely on who they're aiming at most of
yeah.
the time.
It's
No, not at all. And there's like no
Yeah,
thought or feeling between. There's just like,
yeah,
well, we need to get this done because we're losing a
yeah.
lot of money.
yeah. Phaedra wants to target the Peter pals, which surely I think is only Trishelle and John now, right? That's like a very small group of pals,
Well, and
uh,
Peter.
Hmm.
and Peter himself.
Yeah.
And there's a little shot of Trishelle. She whispers something to Peter, so they must be having a little secret strategy for a moment. Phaedra is first. She targets John and misses. CT goes for Kate. Kate goes for CT. She claims she's going alphabetically. Sandra targets John. And so there's a really strange thing here, right? Sandra targets John and says, John doesn't need protection because he's the most faithful of all the faithfuls, and they all laugh about it. And I thought two things. A, why does John have this reputation now as a true faithful that no one has any suspicion of whatsoever? I don't really know why.
I mean, I think originally it was because he was seen as an idiot. I mean, if you
Hmm.
go back and listen to the first few episodes of this podcast, I was like, this man is a moron. He is
Hmm.
not good for anything. I think I said things like that. He's an idiot. He's not good for anything. He's just a useful stooge. And then suddenly
Hmm.
he kind of came into his own. So, but I think he got the label while he was being an idiot.
Yeah, yeah. The strangest thing about this, though, is I don't understand Sandra's reason. She says, I'm going to target
Yeah,
him
right.
because he doesn't.
It's a really stupid reason. Yeah.
No, it's a
I,
backwards reason.
Yeah,
I
it's
have
the
to.
opposite.
yeah.
I would think
Sorry,
surely
Sandra,
you
but
want to
yeah, that no.
protect him.
Like I was so confused when she said that.
Yeah.
Um, just like very reminiscent of when I was on death row and Mike said, he said, I'm going to vote for Mary because if I don't, then she's not going to get banished tomorrow or something like that. And I was like, this is so confusing. It has nothing to do with what's happening and has nothing to do with the shield or anything like that. It was crazy.
Yeah, couldn't quite figure it out. It doesn't matter anyway, though, because she misses. And
Yeah.
Sheree goes for John as well. And it basically continues with everyone. Uh, everyone's eventually starts to target Sheree purely based on the positioning of the ballista.
Right.
And they think, well, the last shot almost hit, so you barely need to maneuver it. Let's just go for the one person
Hmm.
that's already kind of pointed towards. Eventually, MJ hits Sheree. They all celebrate. Not for Sheree being eliminated, just for someone actually hitting
Right.
the glass panel. Now Phaedra's going for Peter, hoping that it'll look less suspicious because his glass pane's just above Sheree's, so
Hmm.
she's just sort of saying, "Oh, I'm just basing it on its proximity to the one that we just hit." But Peter thinks, no, there's more going on here. She is targeting me
Hmm.
deliberately. John doesn't look very pleased about it either. From here on in, CT eventually hits Phaedra, Sheree hits MJ, MJ knocks out Sandra. Metaphorically, everyone is then aiming for CT and missing. And Phaedra does this thing that becomes quite a big deal. She
Hmm.
switches course. She decides she's going to totally move the ballista to aim for Trishelle in a totally different part of the panel, which raises some suspicion. Kate finally hits Trishelle's name and has a moment in her interview where she says, why did Phaedra move it there? She's not doing herself any favors. Phaedra then manages to hit Kate's panel, and I wondered if that was smart because I thought, well, on one hand, it gives the impression they are not in cahoots with one
Hmm.
another. On the other, surely they should have. Would it not have been smart for the traitors to give themselves the chance to win a shield? Because
I,
then they could have free reign over who they murdered.
but to
Yeah.
me, it doesn't matter. I mean, to me, the whole thing was nonsense, in my opinion, because it, it there was no reason for Phaedra to switch from CT to Trishelle
Hmm.
because, okay, let's say Trishelle did get the shield. Who cares? You still got Peter if he's not banished
Mm,
and John. So who cares if Trishelle gets the shield? And then instead they leave CT with the shield, who didn't need it anyway, and give them this big talking point.
yeah.
I mean, there's Mary, there's so few pieces of hard evidence you
Hmm.
get in this
Hmm.
game. And this was hard enough evidence that moving forward, it literally flipped CT. He was telling Peter flat out, I'm voting for you, and instead became the biggest advocate the other way after this mission.
Well, and their reason for being mad at Trishelle was that, oh, she apparently has this notebook full of bullet points and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's her having a notebook full of bullet points and not having the shield isn't going to save her. Like, it'll save her from murder that night, but she's still going to bring her bullet points to the round table.
Right.
That doesn't protect you from that. So be less obviously mad about that so that you can kind of like rein it back and be like, these are non-issues. What you're bringing is non-issues. See how cool I am about it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
In the end, it comes down to CT and John, and CT manages to smash John's panel, meaning that CT wins the shield. On the way back
Yay.
to
What a finally, it was just like, oh my God, could we have fast
Such a
forwarded to more of
drag
that?
on. I know.
Yeah, I think maybe they'll rethink this mission a little bit going forward.
I think they'll still have something like it,
Yeah.
which they have in other places, because it's given us, in both UK and US, it's given us drama. It's given us changes in the way things happened, without giving anything away about what happened in UK. But we saw, I mean, we just talked about it, flipped CT in this case. So it's a mission. We often talk about the missions are pointless, but this one actually allowed Phaedra to make a mistake, and she did.
Yeah. I think they just need like apparatus that's easier to operate.
Yeah, I mean, some of those, when they showed the side shots, it looked to me that when the ballista bolt came out, I'm showing this as if people can see on audio, it turned sideways, like it almost hit the pane sideways, and I'm like, that's poor craftsmanship right there.
Yeah, it's tough. And not a spoiler, but in an Australia season, I think the second one, they did like axe throwing, which seemed slightly easier, maybe,
and
to hit something.
Wasn't there crossbows and axe throwing in that season also? Real crossbows
with
real
flames on them.
Yeah.
I also felt like it just didn't have enough power, because sometimes they throw it and it would like fall down before it even got close to the pane. So I'm like, you're not shooting hard enough.
Yeah.
It reminded me of like the Nerf guns my kids have,
I feel like the Nerf guns would have done more damage.
Yeah. I say have. I mean, the youngest one just turned 25. So when I still have them in the basement down here next to me. I don't know why I still have them. I have Nerf swords and Nerf axe, but what am I doing with them? I don't know. Waiting for grandkids that I could beat up with a Nerf sword, I guess.
My 9-year-old would love those.
After the mission, we are in the cars heading back to the house, and we get a few little snippets of interesting things. Sandra tells John that she really wanted him to have a shield, and I thought, but you tried to target him.
Yeah.
Maybe
she knew she was going to miss. Maybe she knew she was going to miss.
Yeah. Kate tells CT that she even though she aimed for him, she missed on purpose. Trishelle points out to Sheree and Peter that Phaedra's move towards her glass pane was very strange, and this sort of just is amplified from here on in. Back at the house, we are in the kitchen. Peter is talking to Trishelle and John as if, he's talking as if it's now so obvious he's up for banishment. Like he's like, earlier on he was like, "What, me banished?" And now he's like, "Well, guys," as if it was his idea. He's like, some banishment tonight, guys. Like, they literally told him this earlier, and he was like, "What?" But now he's acting like, "Yes, I knew this all along." John has an idea. He now thinks that actually Sandra and MJ are the ones who could be swayed. They call Sandra in to talk to them. And Sandra looks to John, and I'm not sure what she means. She says, "I'm just going to wait until the round table, and I'll know what I'm doing when you start talking." I couldn't really judge that. I don't know what she meant, or what. I mean, what was your interpretation of this?
I also had the same question when she said it. I think she meant you as in all of you,
Okay.
the all-encompassing you. Um, I also think that she knew what she was doing and she just didn't want to get into it. She wasn't going to be like CT and say, I'm voting you out. I think she was pretty sure what I think she has a much bigger plan than they're showing us. And I've gotten into a few discussions on Twitter about this where people are like, Sandra doesn't know what's going on. No, I'm pretty sure Sandra does know. She may not, I mean, almost certainly doesn't know about Kate, but I think she knows, just like she knew Parvati was a traitor, she knows Phaedra's a traitor. And I think that she just also knows how you get to the end, which leads to uh, plays with Peter, I think in the same conversation, asked her if she would rather get traitors out or stick with her friends. And I had tweeted, the answer is to stick with your friends slash allies.
Yeah.
Continually getting
100%.
continually getting out traitors just means new people will replace them and you won't know who. So it's much better to keep allies and a known traitor around. So apparently lots of people agreed with this because when I tweeted it, it sparked a lot of conversation. Sandra and about 20 other people, as of this recording, retweeted it. 50,000 views. So it's definitely a hot topic. Almost everyone who has replied has agreed. Like I said, in my circle, they tend to. But it's led to some interesting conversations and, about some people saying, but Sandra doesn't know. And it's like, no, Sandra does know. It's just not being shown on the television broadcast as much.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is a smart game is boring TV.
Right. Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
perfect because it's the same thing I say about Survivor. That there are certain things you should do. And this is why the hosts of both Survivor and the Traitors say things that are contrary to good strategy. Jeff Probst is out there on Survivor saying you got to make big moves. Yeah, if you want to get voted out. And same with the Traitors. Every host of the Traitors is like, you have to hunt the traitors. You have to get them out. And if you go a few weeks without, or a few days, I guess, without doing it, they're like, oh, it's so terrible. You guys don't know what you're doing. You need to get some, because they want to see that drama, but it's not good gameplay.
No.
Yeah. So while John's plan was to talk to Sandra, Trichelle's plan is to focus on MJ and Kate. Before she sort of gets there, Peter does what Peter does best. He pulls Phaedra into a room for a private chat. He's trying to get her away from the other women. Meanwhile, Sandra sort of gets to them before Trishelle does and just tells them, John thinks Phaedra's a traitor. And Peter and Phaedra are having their secret little chat in the sort of library room, and he just tells her he thinks that she's a traitor. Kate and Sandra are tiptoeing outside to eavesdrop on this, and Trishelle then arrives to explain to the others why she thinks Phaedra's a traitor. Kate sort of doesn't say much. Like she really looks like she's processing this and thinking, how do I play this? Like, do I go along with it? Do I say nothing? Do I defend Phaedra? And she kind of pulls the focus back to Peter. Like she just decides, I think, to keep going with that for now. Like she's not ready to turn on Phaedra, although I think she actually needs to decide now what she's going to do. Like she needs to decide if she's going to turn on her, do it now, or. But I don't think
I don't think
at that point.
Yeah. Right. I mean, she's just wrapping her mind around being a traitor. I don't think she can wrap her mind around that quickly being a traitor to another traitor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's blowing her mind a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trishelle then says to some of the women who are there, she says, I know some of you just won't vote for Phaedra because you're blinded by your friendship with her. And MJ speaks up and says, no, actually, that's not the case. I
love her for this. Yeah.
She says, I'm going to have an open mind. That's not actually true. I may well vote for Phaedra. So CT is then I think he's on his own and he's sort of reflecting on the mission. And
Hmm.
he thinks that Sandra and Phaedra worked together to block Trishelle from winning a shield. So he's half right. And he runs this idea by Trishelle. And Trishelle says that she believes this is true about Sandra and implies she now maybe thinks that Sandra's a traitor, but she
Hmm.
doesn't want to bring that up tonight. She just wants to
Yeah.
focus on Phaedra for now.
And this is when I was yelling on Twitter, stop suggesting that Sandra is a traitor. I don't want her name coming up at all. Um, and then someone replied, it's okay. They're suggesting Sandra is a traitor, and Sandra isn't in
It's
this
true.
game. So,
It's true.
Sandra is safe. Um, I did want to go back to something before this conversation. When Kate was talking about Peter, and she says, Peter's trying to make it to the end. I don't want him at the end. And I'm like, yes, go Kate,
Yeah,
Who
she's
knew?
got
I'd be,
she's got that right.
yeah.
Yeah, get him out. This sort of section ends with another of CT's like he's just like so to me New York. He's like, let's do it. Detroit is get winnable.
Yeah. You sound
So
like there's the British show Spooks.
yeah.
Okay. So in an early episode of Spooks, well, actually, I don't remember if it's early, but somewhere along the line, they have a British actress playing a New York CIA agent. And it's the worst combination ever. I mean, the funny thing is, there are British actors who come over to the US and play great US accents. Half the cast of The Walking Dead are British people, and they talk with Southern accents and all these other accents.
Like
But
me.
for whatever reason, yes,
Thank you.
for whatever reason, this one on the spoon, it was just it killed my opinion of Brits being able to do US accents for so many years until I saw better actors doing it.
Yeah.
And you just reminded me of that. So
Okay. But I reminded you of the good ones.
yes, of course.
So it's time for the round table. And going in, we see various sort of interview segments.
Mhm.
MJ is really struggling going in, which I think there's foreshadowing going on
Yes,
here for
yes.
what is probably going to happen. Kate feels a bit more comfortable now since this morning. She's actually quite enjoying being a traitor. She thinks Peter is going to get banished tonight. John is going for Phaedra and says, if we don't get rid of her, she'll get rid of us. And that's generally what traitors do.
Yes.
So
Now, before we go in, I want to talk about how Alan brought them in to the round table, because he said the traitors and faithfuls are throwing slings and arrows at each other. Yeah, Alan, that's not the way slings and arrows work. You don't throw a sling and an arrow at people.
Yeah.
Maybe he was instructing them in the ballista, and that was the problem. You have to throw it at the glass, and
Yeah, that didn't
throwing
even
a
occur.
sling at someone is not going to hurt them.
True. I didn't even notice it.
Yeah.
He tells them then in the banishment room that the prize fund right now is $129,750. Tells them that's not too shabby. And he sort of carries on this metaphor. He says, earlier you were firing arrows, but in this room you'll be firing accusations. John begins and tells everyone it is a pivotal moment in the game. I mean, it's funny when they say these things. I don't know, Manny, you will understand this better than me. I sort of think every banishment's a pivotal moment, is it not? Like
it is.
Yeah.
No, I can understand what he's saying here, because if MJ votes Phaedra, then it may mean that Peter's pals have gained enough leverage now to literally pivot. It was literally a pivot point.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, on all these shows, it's the most important challenge yet.
Yeah, every murder, every
Right.
banishment, it's like, this
Right.
is the one. This is the one where we're going to get it right. This is the one where we're going to figure it out. And you're not. It's like every single time, it's very easy to vote out faithfuls.
Yeah. And of course, they also don't know how many traitors there are. And so
Hmm.
on your season, Mary, there were three traitors
Yeah.
at the start. And what were you told? Were you all told there are between three and five?
They
Or
told us between 3 and 4.
okay. Three or
Ah, three and
Yeah.
a half.
four.
Yeah. Well, they said up to 4,
Okay.
basically.
Okay.
So that could, like, we were like, oh, that could be 2, it could be 3. But I think the general consensus amongst all of our cast was that there was 3. I feel like the only people who wouldn't say how if they felt there was 3 or 4 were the actual traders.
Yeah, yeah.
They were very wishy-washy about that.
Mm. So John says to everybody that uh, he's talking to Phaedra. He says, "I do believe, although you're a magnificent person, you're a traitor." And he gives some evidence. He says, two people who've been banished as traitors both named you as a traitor, which, yeah, that's pretty
Hmm.
pretty spot on. Pretty, you know, as evidence goes, that's pretty good, I think. And he says to her, your approach is to avoid error, that she's non-committal, but is fatal under cover of darkness. And says, I'm convinced that if you aren't banished, I won't be here tomorrow. So he thinks that she doesn't really, she's not that outspoken at the round table, and she's sort of staying in the background too much, and he finds that suspicious. Phaedra, of course, argues back very quickly and says, you speak very eloquently, and unfortunately, this isn't Parliament. Those two traitors you spoke of were both in collusion with your bromance friend Peter, and asks, what does that really mean? Why aren't you talking about that? And she asks, why did Peter suddenly want to work with me today? Why did he take me aside for this little chat? Peter steps in and says, no, that's not what was happening. That's not what I was doing. And Phaedra goes on to bring up Peter's closed door meetings that he likes to have, and she
Hmm.
finds that very suspicious. I mean, she doesn't find it suspicious because she knows he's not a traitor, but she's
Right, right.
pretending she finds it suspicious.
Yes.
And she says, what you might have forgot, Peter, is this is not The Bachelor, and I don't have to kiss your ass for a rose.
Yes.
Which made me laugh again.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is a point in the show. Every time there's an aerial shot of the table, all I can look at is the moon symbol in the middle
Yeah.
because I
Yes.
keep thinking about that other mission where nobody knew whether it was the sun or a moon. So now I'm like always very, very aware of it. Peter says that he liked Phaedra until now, and he mentions the letter that he refused. He's like, "You tried to recruit me, and I refused that." And Phaedra's just like, "I don't know anything about your letter."
Yes.
CT
I mean, it
then,
was a good ploy on his part to see if she might slip. I
yeah,
mean, it was
yeah,
Yeah.
a good thing to bring up. Um, but the thing that got me, you mentioned seeing the moon on there. The thing that gets me are the Trishelle shots in all of these, because it seems like no matter what is said,
she's
they
like,
cut to a clip of, yes, the most shocked thing that
yes,
like she has ever heard, and it's got to be out of context, because
totally,
like one of them
Yeah.
was when Phaedra said, "This is not The Bachelor." Cut to Trishelle with this massive shocked face on it. It's like, no, Trishelle knows it's not The Bachelor. She's not that
Yeah.
surprised about it.
I saw they were doing that with MJ as well. They were like
Yeah.
going to MJ where she was like making disgusted faces at like pretty much every single thing that was said. And I'm like, why are you guys so shocked?
Yeah.
definitely. CT speaks at this point. He explains his new theory about the mission. Well, it's not really a new theory. Several of them thought this was weird. He uses an illustration. He uses his slate to draw out the board of the panels
Yes.
and the names, and
Hmm.
points out, Phaedra, the way that you targeted Trishelle was very suspicious. Why did you move all the way over there on the board? And Trishelle jumps in, backs this up, and says, yeah, it was weird. Why did you go for me like that? Sandra then turns things back to Peter, and this is, well, we'll talk about this again at the end. You, David, you're very sort of team Sandra.
Hmm.
I can't figure out Sandra, so I
Did
don't
that come
know
through?
how much of
Have,
this is she's faking it, or because she turns back to Peter and questions his alliance with Parvati, and again, why did you try and work with her if you thought she was a traitor? I don't get it. And Sheree's supporting that too. So,
I think Sandra is playing them at this point. I think she knows damn well Peter's not a traitor.
mm,
I think she knows that Phaedra is, but
Mhm.
she needs to. I mean, we saw her with the pool ball. I'm sorry, the what were they? Not billiards.
snooker.
Yeah, snooker balls. That setting up with alliances. She just the facts don't matter.
Mhm,
What matters is convincing people to vote out the opposing alliance.
mhm.
And
Mhm.
so whatever she needs to say, I think she'll say.
Yeah.
Now, would it be great if we got confessionals of her saying, I know Peter's not a traitor, but I want him gone? Yes, those would be amazing. But I think production doesn't want that. They want to continue to pretend it's a game of trying to get out the traitors. Even though they
Mhm.
have some things about alliances and stuff, I don't think they want to go full on like, oh, she's lying about this
Yeah.
aspect of things.
Or I have another theory that you're not going to like, David. I
Yeah.
I do worry that Sandra is not going to make it to the end and she might be murdered soon. And therefore, in terms of production and editing, they think there's no point in building up that
Mm.
storyline for Sandra because it's not going
Mhm.
to lead to anything. So I kind of have that worry.
See, but why would they murder Sandra when Sandra is defending? See, that's another thing. I mean, Mary, I mean, it's what Kevin was trying to do to you, thinking that
Mhm.
you were a traitor, saying, I'll get close to the traitor, so therefore they won't murder me.
The
And
traitor's
so,
pet.
yeah, I think Sandra is playing the role of the traitor's pet at this point.
But
Why would
yeah, but
why would Phaedra
quietly.
want to murder her?
To
Yeah.
frame
Yeah.
Peter if he's still around, maybe.
Yeah,
Well,
maybe Peter's trying to play the traitor's pet as well, but he's doing it loudly,
Yeah.
in a way to be like, no, I'm friends with this person because they're a traitor, and he's saying that, which is what's
yeah.
putting a massive target on his back, as opposed to like Kevin with me, and he thought that I was a traitor. He's like, I'm not going to tell everyone that I think. I'm going to tell like a few people that I think she's a traitor, but not everybody. Because
Mhm.
what's the point? Then the traitor knows you're not actually their ally, you're not actually their
Right.
friend. It is a really stupid move on his part. And I agree with you, David, that I think Sandra is playing a very quiet traitor's pet.
Yeah.
And Peter also tries to sort of prove his faithfulness at this point because he
Mm-hmm.
goes back to the Bergie shield stunt that he
Hmm.
pulled off and he says, this alone proves I'm not a traitor. And he reaffirms what John said. He said, if we don't get this right tonight, the traitors will win the game, which may be true, but again, they don't know how many traitors there are. And
What he really means is Peter's pals won't win the game.
yeah,
Yeah. Peter
Um,
won't win if we get this
yes,
wrong.
yeah, yeah. And the other thing is, everything that he says proves that he's a faithful could easily have been done by a traitor. It
Yeah.
would have been a brilliant move for a traitor to do what he did
yeah, yeah.
and then sing their own praises for the whole rest of the season. Like,
Mm-hmm.
no, I saved us. I tricked the other side, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, no spoilers, no names. We
mm,
did see something like this in UK Traitors, a traitor playing
yes,
very, very cleverly with the shield and it working to their
Mm-hmm.
advantage.
yeah.
It's time for the votes, but something that I noticed just before the votes begin is it looks, from the look of the edit, there are no suspicions on Kate. Like,
Right.
one day in, she's doing all right. Nobody
Hmm.
seems to be questioning
Yeah.
her at all, unless they did and they've cut it all out. But I don't think
Yeah.
so. Here we go then. Phaedra is first to vote, and she votes for Peter, of course, as does Sandra, which again is not that surprising based on what she
Right.
just spoke about at the round table. Peter's next, of course, he votes for Phaedra. And this is the point where as he's voting, he says, I am faithful to the end. I would never be a traitor. Or I think he said earlier, I would never be a traitor. Like he's still he's
Hmm.
clinging to that. And as if it really genuinely means something about him as a human being.
Right.
And John is up next and votes Phaedra as well. Not surprising. As do Trishelle and CT. So he has turned on her now.
Hmm.
Sheree is up next and she votes for Peter. she says that she doesn't believe his recruitment story. She doesn't believe that he
Right.
was offered recruitment and turned it down. And Kate is next, and yeah, she's not turning on Phaedra yet. She votes for
Right.
Peter. That means that it is 4 votes each, and therefore MJ has the decider. So of course they've sort of engineered it in that way that she would be
Right.
the last one, and that's why
Hmm.
they've deliberately showed us her at various points in the episode struggling, or
Hmm.
during that conversation with Kate earlier, saying that line about actually I may vote for Phaedra. My mind is not made up. The
Hmm.
credits start to appear at the bottom of the screen, and I realize, oh, we're not going to find out. They are
Yes.
going to leave us on a cliffhanger. I think this is the best cliffhanger of the season so far.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to say something shocking. Twitter does not agree with you.
Oh,
No, I don't
I
agree
mean,
with you either.
yeah, I mean,
I loved it.
I
That was
I don't
great.
mind it. I mean, I said on Twitter something like, "Oh my God, I can't believe they left us on this cliffhanger," but I can because they always leave us on, or almost always leave us on some sort of cliffhanger, whether it's who they're going to
Hmm.
murder or whatever. So I don't mind this. This is an actual cliffhanger, like last week's cliffhanger. Ooh, is Kate going to accept or not? Yes, she is. It's not a cliffhanger. We saw some of those in the British version too.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
um, now, I will say, so someone on Twitter, and okay, someone that I saw on Twitter, I'm sure about a dozen people have done this, but a guy who was on, um, um, the reality show, this is so bad.
The challenge, Big
Yeah,
Brother.
no, the reality show based on the Korean show about a whole
Oh,
bunch of
Squid
people.
Game.
Yes, thank you. Wow, I just could not. That was out of my brain. So he was on the Squid Game. He's a big reality show fan, and he did a freeze frame of it, blew it up. You cannot tell for sure whose name it is,
Hmm.
but he said to me, "This looks a lot more like Peter than Phaedra. It's too short to be
Hmm.
Phaedra, although it's about the same, just the way it's written." I couldn't tell anything. I have seen at least 3 or 4 um, polls on Instagram and on Twitter saying, who do you think it's going to be? Every one of them ran almost identical. I mean, it may be that the same people like me are voting in all of them, but that it's 2/3 of people think it's Peter and 1/3 think it's Phaedra. So I think it's Peter. I'm I I I'm not saying I'd bet the house on it, but I mean I'm pretty damn sure.
Okay.
I think it's Phaedra just because they spent so much time, and they even pointed out with MJ being like, I'm not here to just vote and stay with my friends. I'm here to make an impact on the
Mhm.
show and an impact on what's happening. And yeah, I felt with all the shots to her confused face, and like she felt like she was agreeing with a lot of things that were being said. I feel like she's kind of like a wild card, and she's going to throw out Phaedra's name.
I think they just did that to make this a true cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
other vote, literally every other vote, I could have predicted. I did predict ahead of time. We knew they didn't have to turn them over. It's like we knew, who was voting how before they did it.
Hmm.
Hers was really the only one up in the air. So I mean, yeah, I mean it could be. I still think she's sticking with her alliance and
Hmm.
voting out Peter.
I'm with Mary. I think
Uh-oh.
she's going to vote for Phaedra, partly because of what you've just said, Mary, about sort of the editing choices, but also because when I look at the votes, what I realize is 4 people have voted for Peter. 2 of those are traitors. So they are just voting for him because they don't want to vote for themselves.
Mhm.
Uh, one of the other people is Sandra, and if I'm to believe you, David, Sandra also doesn't really think he's a traitor. She's just voting for him, so her vote almost doesn't count. Like it's not a genuine vote that she thinks he's a traitor.
Mhm.
That means the
Hmm.
only person who's sort of genuinely voted for Peter, believing he's a traitor, is Sheree. She's like the one person, and I just think Sheree's not a great player at this game and doesn't know what's going on.
No, and I think she's doing it because the other option was Phaedra, and she's
She
friends with
doesn't
Phaedra.
want it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, if she gets to the end with Phaedra, Phaedra wins.
yeah.
I mean, she's
absolutely. Yeah.
so, um, but
So
Also, I think that MJ was in the group where Sandra laid out the snooker balls,
yeah,
So although they're making MJ look like, they've repeatedly either they have made her look like an idiot or she's made herself look like one or the other. Um, she if she, I just feel like she's kind of in the same position as Sandra, except as a follower instead of a leader. Like, I think she's going to vote with her alliance.
I've got faith that she's, especially that little moment that maybe seemed like it was nothing, but when she
Hmm.
clocked Kate at breakfast and noticed that she was acting
Hmm.
differently, I think maybe MG is actually a little smarter than I might have given her credit for. So I'm going with, I think she's
Oh,
picking
No,
Phaedra.
and then Kate
that's why
will
I'm
have to
hoping it's Phaedra.
blackmail. And then
Yeah.
Kate will have to blackmail, and she'll blackmail MJ because MJ clocked her.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping that it's Phaedra so that more people can pay attention to Kate because I think as long as Phaedra's there, even if Kate's like spiraling out of control,
Hmm.
no one's going to be like, "Oh, let's vote for her," because at this point, people are used to her being out of control and
Right.
wild, and she purposely tried to lose last time, and
Hmm.
she's here kind of just to mix up the mud a little bit.
Hmm.
She wasn't like added to the cast because they were like, oh, this is gonna make good television. It's not.
Right.
She knows what's happening, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah. I I have another couple of hypotheticals for us to think about. Firstly, well, like David, you've kind of already predicted my next
Hmm.
question. If Phaedra goes, if she is banished, will Kate have to blackmail again? And who might she pick? So you think yes, and
Right.
she'll maybe go for MJ.
I think she has to. We know they always
Hmm.
need to keep at least one traitor going into the finale.
Hmm.
And this was episode 9. This goes till I believe episode 11 because I think 12 is the reunion.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
Um
think that as well.
so there's no way they're going to only have as much as you and I have discussed, we wouldn't mind it. There's no way they're going to go, have the possibility of going into the finale with no traitors.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I do think it would be funny if that's why we saw that from MJ is because it's the reason that Kate then turns around and you know blackmails her. I don't think MJ is the best person to blackmail, but it would be funny.
Yeah.
I
What
think
do you
Kate
think?
might blackmail Peter because he's already got suspicion on him.
Yeah.
And so at the next round table, you throw that out. And I'm sure once he's been blackmailed, he'd act so much differently.
Hmm.
And then you can be like, hey, look, we got another traitor out. And then there's no real telling. And then by that point, there's like one episode left. They're not going to force you to blackmail
Right.
someone.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I had said a couple episodes ago that they should have or in predicting who they might need to, or maybe I said it on Twitter or something for this last episode that it would have been funny to blackmail Peter for this one because he had already turned them down once. So now it would be
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, now you have a choice. Now I don't know if there are rules like you can only try to recruit the same person once,
Mm-hmm.
or if blackmail counts as recruiting. So it's possible it's not allowed.
But I mean,
Um,
after the way that Peter's been talking, I can imagine like him being blackmailed and him just going, I'm out, I'm leaving, and like no
which
Yeah.
would
one
be
still
better.
be like, I'm
That
going
that would
home.
be amazing. Can you
Yeah.
Murder
imagine
me.
That'd be
everybody
some good
just being
television.
like, "See, we told you Peter was an idiot." Uh,
Yeah.
um, on the other hand, then, if Phaedra stays and they go for Peter,
mhm.
who might Phaedra and Kate murder next?
I think MJ. I think that's where Kate.
Okay,
I think one way or the other, this MJ thing comes into play,
okay.
and I think Kate
Hmm.
was so flustered by it that she's going to be like, and remember, actually, even if she blackmails, at least as far as we know from this episode, you know, she may get to murder again too. So MJ may be dead no matter what.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you think the same, Mary? That they would go for MJ?
I, I don't know. I have a really strong feeling that MJ is going to make it. I feel like her edit is kind of changing so that she's getting more screen time because she's figuring it out a little bit more. I do think that both Kate and Phaedra are vindictive enough that if it's not Peter, they're going to go for Trishelle or John.
I that's what I think. I think their tempers would just get the better of them, and they just
Yeah,
go for
I think,
Trishelle, and they're like, I don't care if it looks obvious, we just want her out.
yeah, I think they're too petty, like legitimately too petty to ever think about strategy with killing.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same
Yeah.
way. Now, David, I'm relying on you again here because I have not seen the post-mortem little episode of the show. What can
Mhm.
you report back to us? Well, with all honesty and no lies included, that's
Right. Never, never. I solemnly swear. I solemnly swear to. Uh, uh, so, um, Phaedra was on there, obviously, and she said she chose to recruit Kate because Kate played before and is hilarious and quirky. Not great reasons, I mean, we had talked early on, that should have picked for good strategic reasons. Instead, picked for personality. Maybe she was tired of the white bread people that she had to deal with.
Mhm.
The plain toast people she had to deal
the
with
Melba
earlier.
toast.
Yes. Um, and so, and then Kate said after she played the first time, she thought the Traitors had such an advantage, but now she thinks they don't because of the paranoia. She was still right the first time. Yes, they
No,
do have
yeah.
an advantage, whether, even if you're a little paranoid, no, Traitors still have a huge advantage.
Yeah.
If they use it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Kate admitted that murdering Kevin was, quote, not the most strategic decision. But you have to spend a lot of time together in the castle. So, that goes back to what we figured from that as well. And then Kevin, who was interviewed after he was murdered, said his strategy was to find people who had a lot of experience in strategic gaming and follow their plan. So yeah, Kevin was another real, a real leader, a real brain trust with him there.
Mhm.
And that's all the interesting
How is
stuff.
everyone they murder a leader? That's my question.
Yeah.
Like every single time, like this person is a leader of their group, and it's like there are 12 people in that group.
Yeah.
How are they all leaders?
Well, he wasn't a leader. They said he wasn't a leader, so but yeah, so that's it. I mean, this postmortem was not terribly exciting.
Okay.
I mean, most of them aren't, but this, I had a couple of closing thoughts. I don't
Go for it.
So I just a lot of it we've already talked about. So but like Peter's pals, they keep talking about needing to hit the right target and get out a traitor, and it's just annoying. It's moralistic. We've discussed it today. We've discussed it previously. They're setting themselves up to have new traitors continually put in that they have no clue about. And if they succeed in getting rid of Phaedra, then congratulations. You will have 2 traitors and no clues whatsoever. So good job in losing the game that way, if that's what you end up doing, So, that was the main thing. The other thing you had mentioned about CT actually using his voting slate to draw out the evidence. I just enjoyed that. And him recognizing actual hard evidence as compared to what other people say are hard evidence and really isn't.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Great. We have some questions from listeners. The first one I have, we've kind of already covered, but I'll read it anyway. So this is from Gary Rose on X. He asks, how much does Sandra really know? Seems to me she's lost, but will probably be a winning finalist anyway. Haven't seen her really that she knows Phaedra is a traitor. And I guess, David, you're very much in the camp of she knows everything.
Yes. And I mean, some of it comes from social media. She has said certain things on social media that indicate now do we believe all of their social media when it's retrospective? No. But in between knowing how she plays games and knowing what's going on in this game and that, yeah, I'm pretty certain she knows.
Okay. And Mary, you feel the same way.
Based on nothing but vibes, I feel like she knows a lot more than they're letting on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask this earlier, actually. Mary, how familiar are you with people like Sandra or any of the contestants from their other? I mean, I know very few of them from other places. So, how familiar are you?
My sister watches a lot of Real Housewives and like Selling Sunset and that sort of, that's her version of reality TV. Um, but I've never really watched tons of Survivor or Big Brother or any of that stuff. Certainly never even heard of the challenge before this season of The Traitors. And to hear that it's been like going on for years and years and years, I'm like, where was it?
MTV.
They're like, yeah. Yeah, they're like, oh, I won the challenge like 6 times. I'm like, what? When did it come out? But I will say I'm going to watch a full season of Survivor this year. My family's decided that this season, we're going to watch it together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Starts this Wednesday.
Yeah, I know. I'm so excited. We're going to have a watch party because I bought cable for when I was on TV, and now I still need to use it. So now I still need to use this cable package that is just sitting on my.
And I can recommend a good Survivor podcast for you too. Just listen to.
You might know one or two.
Yeah, I might know one.
Yeah.
So I know this isn't pertinent to this, but if you didn't watch that reality TV, how did you end up on the Traitors?
Lots of secret stuff in the background, I was found, and I like watched. I used to be like, oh yeah, I love reality TV. And then I got plunked into this show, and they were like, how do you feel about all these celebrities? And is it going to change how you play your game? And I just honestly had to say, I don't know who you're talking about other than like Rick Campanelli. Like, he's the only one that I'm like, oh my God, a celebrity. Everyone else, I was kind of like shit talking them to their face. And then I get out of the game and I get my phone back and I go onto Instagram and I'm like, oh, those celebrities, they just weren't in my circle, but now they are. And I'm trying to research more. And so I'm not as embarrassed next time I meet celebrities.
I mean, you're not the only one to have been recruited for that show. I know, Mike talked about, they were looking for a magician and they found Magician Mike. And so, other people were as well. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I think the UK Series 3 applications are, maybe they've closed now, but I kept seeing it online. People kept like sending me, hey, we apply for Traitors Season 3 in the UK. But based on what I know about casting of these shows, probably very, very few of in the UK anyway, like the UK contestants are chosen from people who just happened to go online and apply. I think quite often people are kind of targeted other ways.
Yeah, and it's like a very much just the creative industry in general, not saying that this is how I got it, but it's very nepotism. There's a lot of like, this person who knows this person. And so, mine, I'm like, it's like 4 degrees of separation to like, this person turned it down, but they know this person and then actually they know this person, and it got to me eventually. Yeah. And I said yes. So
yeah. And then there's Australian season 2 where clearly nobody knew how to play the damn game. So they hadn't watched it, they didn't read the rules, they just went wild. So
I have another question from Jordan sent me this question on Instagram. So hello, Jordan. I've kind of already answered this to him, but I'll read it out anyway because it was a fun question that I just hadn't even thought of. Yeah, Jordan said, whenever everyone is arriving to the castle for the UK, but this would apply to like maybe John and Ekin-Su from this season. He says they seem in such awe of the castle. I just imagine everyone is so unfazed to castles in the UK and Europe. Do you think production is telling them to hype it up? But my response was, No, actually, I don't think production needs to hype them up for the castle. I
Mm-mm.
think, first of all, I live in the UK. I'm excited to see a castle. Like,
Mm.
I'm not surrounded by them. So if I went to Traitors, where they film, I'd still be like amazed by it. And I think just generally, the atmosphere, and obviously Mary, you can speak to this, the excitement of just being on set and you arrive at the
Yeah.
place and you
Yeah.
probably don't need hyped up. I think it probably would just naturally be really exciting to be there, so that would
It
come
is.
across.
And it's a beautiful, the one that they've used for the UK and the US is a beautiful castle.
Yeah.
Like I would be freaking out about it every single time we drove up to it. And ours wasn't like a castle, it was just this like beautiful sort of old manor. But even then I was still like, oh, I can't believe I get to stay here. You know, it's beautiful. I think the only time they ask you to hype it up is if they're like, oh, sorry, we didn't get that filmed properly. You got to walk
Mhm.
back again. And that's the only time I would say that reality TV feels scripted
Yeah.
is when they're like, oh, we have to get that reaction one more time. And you're like,
Yeah.
I can't be candid a second time.
Yeah.
David, I think you also have a couple of questions from online.
Yes, I have a couple of questions from Ali F on Twitter. She said, I feel it's almost survival in a Scottish castle. After Dan gave up Phaedra, and everyone seems to know Phaedra as a traitor after not being on anyone's radar, which I don't mind since it's such a different dynamic compared to other seasons. What's your take on it? So I'm not 100% sure how the survivor, I mean, I guess it goes back to what we were saying that yes, it's a game of alliances. They know Phaedra is a traitor, and it's a game of the most faithful of the faithfuls wants to get rid of the traitor, whereas the game players want to keep the traitor.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, in that way, it is almost Survivor in a Scottish castle, which when it comes down to it, most reality television could be played that way,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
arguably should be, or competitive reality television, should be played that way. What counts are your allies.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter traitor or faithful. It matters if you have allies,
Mhm.
because if you don't have
Mhm.
allies, you're doomed.
Yeah.
And so yes, from that perspective, yeah, it's Survivor in a castle.
Yeah. Even Alan Cumming makes a sort of not a reference to Survivor, but he makes one of his lines is about tribes. He says it's a house of two tribes, and these two tribes are about to go
Mhm.
to war. So they're sort of even writing that
Hmm.
into his dialogue.
And you have to be a little bit like blind to not say that there is a survivor to traders pipeline.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
there's always someone from Survivor in the traders. If they're doing it with the reality casts and stuff like that, there's just a
Yeah.
very clear pipeline for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there will continue as long as they do,
Mhm.
this way of doing it in the US. It will be. And, it makes for a different game. I was talking to someone else about this on Twitter, and he was saying that basically the game is flawed. It's broken. And this may have been his first season watching, even though he does a
Mhm.
lot of reality TV and podcasting. But he said the way the game is made is broken. And I said, well, what's broken about it is you have people like Phaedra and Sheree who have known each other for 20 years, and Sheree is never going to turn on Phaedra. Never, ever. And
Mhm.
Phaedra didn't have to do anything in game to
Mhm.
make that happen. On other seasons, the traders had to gain the trust of the faithful who they could bring to the end and who would not turn on them. We saw that in season 1. Sheree had to do that. Yes, she used some of her own old friends that she knew, but the people she took to the end were people who were just going to trust her blindly.
Mhm.
Phaedra can do the same thing if she makes it past this with Sheree. And that part of it is broken when you have this type of cast, because they don't have to do any real work
Yeah.
when it's someone like Sheree. Other people
What?
are willing to turn on each other, but
Yeah.
some are not, and that does kind of break a certain aspect of the game.
Yeah.
So now that wasn't the other Twitter question I had, because the other one was also from Allie. Said Peter took Phaedra's I don't have to kiss your ass for a rose comment really personally. Real Housewives say one-liners all day and we love it. But Peter from a TV show where fantasy and quote being there for the right reasons plays a big part. Does this dictate his game on the Traitors is basically the question. And maybe, I mean, I don't know if he took it really personally or he was overacting or it was, again, reaction shots and things like that. I mean, yes, he was appalled that she would, act that way towards him and everything else, but he was also fighting for his own life at that moment. And so he definitely amped up, like you called it, Mary, the disgusted face shots and things like that, So I think he amped it up kind of. It reminds me, and I may have mentioned this once before, but I used to do hearings for work.
Yeah.
And the way the hearings were set up, I was not a lawyer. I was doing the testimony. And our table was facing the board members who made the decision. And often the other table would either be those opposing us or there would be someone next to us who was like making a public comment or something. I couldn't respond verbally a lot of times to like the public comments. So when someone would get up there and say something crazy, I just find one board member to look at and I just like roll my eyes or make faces, things like that, to make it clear that this person was crazy or was saying things that didn't make sense. And I amped it up. I absolutely acknowledge, especially now that I'm retired and it can't be used against me. That I amped it up. And he, I didn't even have television cameras. Actually, I probably wouldn't have done it if I had television cameras on me. But he's doing the same thing. He's amping it up for those who are judging him, basically, and trying to, like, oh, look at her, she's crazy type of look. So did he take, I mean, I do think he took some of it personally because he seems to take everything personally, but I also think he over dramatized it.
Yeah.
I do agree with Phaedra though. And like, because he went from a TV show, maybe it was a few years ago, but he went from a TV show where literally everyone is there to get his attention, to get his respect. He's the top dog. He's the one in charge. And now he's in this new show where he's not really the one in charge, but you can see him really fighting to be the one in charge, to be the leader, to be not necessarily because I know they threw that word around, but the alpha male. But it does feel like a lot of chest beating from Peter, being like, look how smart I am. Look at me, look at me, look at me. But look at me as a faithful only. Whereas like in a game like the Traitors, you do want people to look at you, but you don't want them to always be looking at you.
Right.
And that's where he's getting it mixed up in his head.
Yes, he puts the dick in dictator.
Yeah, he does. He really does.
And on The Bachelor, he put it elsewhere too. So
yeah, I mean, he gives off fuckboy attitude for sure. Like, like the entire time he's talking, I'm like, I would not respect you at a party, but okay.
There are again lots of other questions floating around on YouTube. Too many to read out here, but definitely, again, particularly for Traitors Australia content, if you head over to the YouTube page, which I'll mention at the end, you could get involved in all of the discussions going on there, which is really cool to be part of. So check that out. And I think we are ready to conclude our game of betrayal, the Trader Traitor.
Ooh. Ah.
Mary's already making noises of unhappiness.
Yeah. He's giddy over there.
We've been trying to lie to one another, and I have lied to you both. I'm very sorry. Have you?
No,
both,
you're not.
Have you? I'm not that sorry. Have you both? I'm only sorry if you catch me, and I did a bad job of it.
Yes.
David, did you lie?
I did.
Mary, did you lie to us?
I did. I told one little lie.
Okay. Or maybe a big lie. Who knows?
Maybe that's her lie. Maybe that's her lie. She actually didn't tell a lie until just then. And then she said it was a lie.
Bring it to the round table. We'll discuss it there.
Yeah.
Well, this is the time. It's time for our round table. I will begin by guessing David's lie. David will guess Mary. Mary will guess me. David. I I've scribbled some notes and I can't read some of them.
Oh, good.
I have a few guesses. What now? You mentioned your son's birthday, but I know it was his birthday because you posted about it online.
Yes.
But I wonder if you lied about his age, but I don't think you would do that because one of your lies recently was about a number, and I think you're leaving numbers for now. Unless you lied about you mentioned a video, one of your videos having 50,000 views, and not that I'm undermining the popularity of your videos, but I wondered maybe that's not true. Maybe it's more
Just to
than
be clear,
50,000.
just to be clear, so that you don't make it off of incorrect information, that was a tweet, not a video.
Oh, sorry, that's sweet. Uh, but I'll go. You talked about Nerf swords as well, and I wondered if that wasn't true, but I'm going to go way back to the start. You said something very early on. You talked about, is it Mike Boogie? Is that a
Yes.
person? You said you met Mike.
Maybe.
You said that you met him, I think, and you said it was in a bar in California, and I wondered if maybe the location was a lie.
Nope. Everything about that story was true.
Ah.
I would have changed. The funny thing is, I would have put lies into that whole story, but I didn't know Mary's backstory in terms of whether she watched or knew about Big Brother. So therefore, I just put only the honest stuff about that.
Okay.
Actually, I shouldn't say anything more because I know
Oh,
Mary
yes.
gets a chance to.
Yeah, Mary, you can now jump in and do you have any guesses for David?
I also caught the birthday thing. I was like, I feel like his son isn't actually 25.
Well, you guys need to pay attention to my Facebook post better because I actually said his age in the Facebook post. Yes, he's 25. I even said, I can't believe he's 25.
Yeah.
No, actually, Matthew, you were close on the Twitter thing because it was 25,000 views, not 50,000 views.
Oh, you doubled it.
I should have gone for it. Okay. Well, hey.
So yes, I doubled it. Now it may by the end, get to that. I don't know. I don't think it will. I think it's probably petering out since the show was on yesterday, and I think Sandra retweeting it probably helped a lot. But yes, at one point when I was telling, I don't remember which story I was telling, the Mike Boogie stuff and everything else, you had this big smile on your face, Matthew, and it was
I was just enjoying the story.
It looked like you were like trying to read my soul, in terms of like, so I started almost laughing, and I'm like, now he's gonna think I was lying. So,
also, was that an intentional pun when you said that your tweet was petering out?
No, it was. I thought of it as I was saying it, but it was not originally intentional.
Okay, David, it's your turn now to guess what you think Mary's lie was.
So I think, Mary, that you lied about breakfast being your only meal, because one thing that we see in the Traitors is they feed you guys constantly. Well, not constantly, but we've at least seen lunch and dinner being served in the various shows, and Lord knows Phaedra has made the most of it. So when you said you survived on a croissant and some cold cuts, now the other thing is, at least in the US, cold cuts usually means lunch meat, not breakfast meat. Things like slices of turkey and salami and corned beef and roast beef. And I wouldn't expect that to be in breakfast. So I think that was your lie.
I'm sorry, but that was truthful. They feed you like crazy. It seems like on the American one where they're always eating together. But we had lunches and dinners sequestered away in our rooms, and they weren't great. But
I think Melissa told us about that.
Yeah, and I guess like cold cuts for me, it was more like charcuterie meat. Like there was
Mm.
like calabrese and salami and capicola, that sort of stuff, and a lot of soft cheeses. It really looked like they put out like a charcuterie spread of like meat and cheese, and then they're like, have some coffee and orange juice while you eat this. So that was the truth. That was my truth.
Uh,
I'm gonna swoop in then. I only have one thing written down, Mary. Like I truly have one single guess for you. And I wonder if it was when you talked about what you kept from the show, and you said, "Oh, I have my letter, and I have a hat, and I have Polaroid." I wonder if it's a lie that you don't have your letter.
I do have my letter.
Oh,
Wow. I think
but
my I think my lie got missed a little bit, like just like under the radar. But I said that my daughter was 9, and she's actually 7, and she'll be 8 in like a month or so.
I
you
did
know what?
hear you
I
say that.
I thought about that. I knew that you
Yeah.
said that, and I'm like, on Facebook, I
I
feel
know,
like
David,
I've
you
seen.
follow my Facebook.
I know. I feel like I thought that you had at some point. So there must be someone else who has a 9-year-old who I was thinking
Yeah.
of, because it sounded right to me. And
Yeah.
so because I did think of that one, but I was like, no, that sounds right.
But also, my niece just turned 9 yesterday, so I might have posted that, and you might have been like, "Oh yeah, Mary mentioned
Could have
9
been.
before."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it
So
shows that
yeah.
I read your posts closer than you read mine. I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I have ADHD, okay?
Well, so far, the lying is going 100% well.
yes.
Smashing.
It's down to me. So, Mary, you have first guess. What do you think my lie was?
Ooh. Um, I'm trying to remember everything you said, and it feels like a blur now when you're on the spot and you're like, what was said? Uh, what did you say? I think you're lying about what time you get to like watch the show, because you said that you like sometimes get clips before you actually get to see it, which I'm sure happens. But like, I think, did you say you watched it last night?
Uh, no, that was all true. I just watched it today, but I did see a clip on Kate Chastain's X of, yeah, it was a little preview
Mhm.
of her talking to Phaedra. So that was all true, I'm afraid. Uh, David,
So
I have a horrible
I
feeling
don't
you're going
know
to get
about this.
this.
I
Have a
I
horrible feeling you're going to be
oh
correct.
I remember Alan talking about there being two groups in the house. I don't remember him calling them tribes. I feel like I would have noticed that, but on the other hand, it might have blown by me because I'm so used to Survivor talking about tribes. So I think you might be lying about that he did not use the word tribes.
That was true. He did say
Damn
that.
it.
Yeah. He called them
We're
tribes.
terrible at this.
Yeah.
And he said those two tribes are going to war. Uh, so yeah, that was true. I'm so excited. I've not been caught. David usually catches me out. Uh, my lie was, well, I disguised it with my bad CT accent. I said, "Oh, hey, CT's accent, ha ha ha," and I said, "Oh, I looked it up, and he was born in Queens," and that was my lie. He was
Ah,
he was
Oh,
he was born in I think Brooklyn, another part of New York. I lied about
ah.
Queens. Yay, we're
Would
all
you
good
even know if
liars.
Queens is different from Brooklyn if you looked it up?
Yeah, I've been to New York many times, so I kind of know where the boroughs are. So
Okay.
that's I snuck it in, and I actually thought, well, they'll think that I wouldn't know that, so maybe that's one that I could get away
Yeah.
I only know they're different because of Spider-Man. So
Yeah, excellent reference. In that case, yes, we're all pretty good liars. Then we've fooled one another, but we're bad, faithful at picking up on
yeah,
one another's lies.
yeah.
Yes.
We should be traitors together.
Yeah.
Now, before we all finish, Mary, maybe you can tell us, where can we find you online? What should we be checking out?
I am on Instagram and TikTok as at Mary Was Forden, which is just like a mix of my husband's last name and my last name because I thought it was cool.
Yeah.
And then I have two podcasts right now. One is a Desperate Housewives rewatch podcast with my friend Brett. With my friend Brett McCrindle. It's called Wisteria Lane Poker Club.
Cool.
And the other one is just on my own called Diverse a Tea. And I'm just inviting all of my favorite comedians from Vancouver Island to tell me their favorite celebrity drama.
Excellent. I'm still in like lie detecting mode. So even when you were speaking there, I was like, the podcast's not called that at all. But I'm like, oh no, we've done the
She's a
game.
traitor, I know it.
Yeah, I can relax. Excellent, thank you, mate. And I'll share links to those in the episode description so that people can
Thank
find
you.
those. I was a big fan of Desperate Housewives back in the day. I don't know if I made it all the way to the end, but that sounds really fun.
There's like 8 seasons. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And like every season is like 20 to 23 episodes. And I'm like, this is too much.
In fact, I'm in an online quiz league, and in our last quiz, one of the questions was about actors on Desperate Housewives, and I knew that Terry Hatcher was one of the answers, and I was very proud of myself. David, where can we find you online?
So yeah, I'm all over social media and reality TV podcasting. With US Survivor restarting, I will be back weekly on the Rob Has a Podcast Network with my Why Blank Lost podcast. So, Mary, you should definitely find that. And our preview podcast for this season was posted a couple days ago. You can also find all my various social media accounts through my Linktree at Linktree/David Bloomberg with a dot before the EE in Linktree in the URL, just because that's the way they do it. Or you can find me on most text-based social media like Twitter and Blue Sky as at David Bloomberg. On the video platforms TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram as at David Bloomberg TV. And because Threads is connected to Instagram, I'm at David Bloomberg TV there as well. Most reality TV talk, including Traitors Talk on Twitter. There are some people, refugees from Twitter on Threads and Blue Sky, where we have conversations. There just isn't a critical mass of people there yet, and it's harder to find your people in those places, especially Blue Sky. Although I have heard they're finally going to do hashtags on Blue Sky, so we'll see what happens there. Speaking of TikTok, etc., I've been posting 2 or 3 reality TV short videos every day. Of course, Traitors US thoughts, Australian Survivor videos, including clips and my mini versions of a Why Blank Lost, and some Survivor flashback videos from older seasons. And of course, once US Survivor restarts next week, I'll have more videos of that as well. But I already have a good lineup from US Traitors for this week. I'm getting ready to post the Dick and Dictator one, and a few more good one-liners to get in there.
Yeah, fantastic. As for the podcast, you could do what Karen and Stephen and Anna have done, and that is to donate to the podcast coffee page. That's ko-fi.com/Matthew Keeley. So thanks to Karen and Stephen and Anna. Anna, I don't know if Anna listens to the podcast. I was at a book event this week, and a couple of people from that sent me money. So Anna didn't leave a message, so maybe it wasn't for the podcast, but thanks anyway, Anna. And
people just give you money. You meet them and they give you money.
Well,
damn,
I gave out.
I wish.
Yeah.
I was speaking as an author at an event and gave out free books, but suggested if anyone wanted to donate for the books.
Okay.
I don't talk enough about my books on the podcast, and I really should promote it a bit more. But at some point, I will do that. If you find me online, you can see more about the books that I published there. If the coffee.com is just to help me run the podcast, and also to help something that you'll be helping pay for is a ticket to an event. I mentioned this on the last episode. I think that on Monday, the 26th of February, Alan Cumming will be at a live Q&A in New York. And I sort of half jokingly put out a request for a correspondent, and I've had a response. So now Savannah in New York is going to attend the event on behalf of the podcast, and she'll be meeting me on the podcast next time to feedback to me all about how it went and what the highlights were. So thank you, Savannah, and I'm really looking forward to talking all about that. As always, you can leave reviews and you could follow on whatever podcast platform you're listening to: Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Castbox. Send us any questions or thoughts on episodes. We'll talk about them like we did today. You can find the podcast on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at the Traidar Podcast, or on X at the Traidar Pod. And you can email me at the traidarpodcast@gmail.com. That was an awful lot to get through. Mary and David, thank you so much for being here for this episode of the Traidar. Mary, what a treat to have you. I hope you've had a nice time talking about this episode with us.
I did. I'm so glad to be here. I've been waiting so patiently to come and talk to you guys. So I'm so glad that I got to.
Well, yes, thank you. And we didn't even like kick you off or anything. We didn't say, oh, she's too traitorous, we got to get rid of her.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
We kept you to the finale.
Well, I didn't cry in front of you guys. I think that's the main thing.
Okay.
And I am also very excited to hear thoughts from both of you when we get the relief to our cliffhanger. And hopefully, Mary, we're right, but maybe David's going to beat us and Peter will be gone. Until next time, then, keep us on your Traidar.
Stay traitorous.
Yay!